Have you ever had a dream and been told that your dream can't happen? Have you ever had that image of who it is you want to become and have that image ripped away from you, telling you that it's not possible? Well, we're here today to tell you that your dreams are possible. And more importantly, that you can go after whatever it is you want. We're going to be talking about breaking down barriers. We are going to be talking about leveling up and taking opportunities. We're going to be talking about living your life with impact, legacy, and love. I'm Clara Capano, and stay tuned because this is Women Winning Their Way. Oh, I am so excited to have you here. We are getting ready to talk to Dr. Jen Welter, and you are the first female coach for the NFL, which is absolutely amazing. So, thank you for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I appreciate your persistence. I know I'm not always easy to catch on the football field or in life, so well done to you.
Well, thank you. So I am so excited and have a lot of questions. The whole premise of the show, Women Winning Their Way, is talking about how, as women, both today and future generations, we don't have to fall in line with what society tells us, with our families tell us. We can kick down the door and forge forward, which is exactly what you did. And I want to just kind of dive in and just first start with your dream. You know, as a kid, where did this dream of being involved with professional football start from? And, how did you even cultivate this dream?
I want to say something like when we start with kids.
Mhm.
I think kids inherently have this curiosity, this courage, this view of the world that we as adults don't always just let them have their best selves,
Mhm.
right? Little Jen was like determined and fearless and feisty. And somewhere along the way, the world started to tell her, oh, girls don't do that.
Yeah.
And I think we need to do a little bit less of that with kids and a
Mhm.
little bit more of saying, okay, like if that's how you're going to do it, like what do we do? What do we need to do? And to expand thoughts and dreams the same way we need to do with adults, right?
Absolutely.
Because we start to get back to that root. And so little Jen was like a fearless, courageous, just like loved working on things, loved doing things, loved trying things. And one of those things was football. And I mean, I grew up in Vero Beach, Florida, where football is a way of life. And when I looked at football players on the football field with the bright lights and the big stadium and the applause cheering and the uniforms, I thought they were real life superheroes.
Mhm.
And my first thought was like, I want to be a superhero too. And someone told me girls don't do that.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking like, but why? Why don't girls do that? Like it looks like such a cool thing to do. And I think too often we hear the no's before we hear the, well, if you were going to do that,
Mhm.
here's how you could do it, or here's what you'd need to be really good at. Because a lot of the things kids are going to be like, nope, that's not for me. I tried it and I maybe decided I liked something else.
Right.
So instead of giving hard and fast rules, I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Mhm.
Like, I remember trying to play the violin. I was terrible and I didn't enjoy it.
Right.
And I think my parents enjoyed it the least of anything because if you've
Right.
ever listened to the violin, when it's bad, it's all the way bad, right?
Mm,
And it was probably the only thing that I was like, yeah, no,
not for me.
right? But there's no loss in trying something and not loving it. But I think the real loss for so many of us is not even getting a chance to love it or not love it because somebody closed the door, right?
Exactly. And I think, as girls, so many times, we grow up and we're like, oh, I want to be a nurse or a teacher or, maybe an attorney or something. But again, a football player, no way. And, was there somebody in your inner circle that gave you permission to dream that way? Because I imagine there were more people that said, "You're crazy, you're silly, you're stupid, girls don't do that." Was there anyone that cultivated this dream with you?
So really what happened was, when football wasn't an option, thank goodness I played a lot of sports and, started in solo sports. But as a girl who topped out at 5'2"
Mm,
in height, that didn't end up being the path for me. But I really found my place in playing on team sports because of the kind of teammate I was, right? Like I was relentless and feisty, and I loved to make everybody around me better. And I really found that the place where I didn't have to be all things to all people all by myself was in team sports. So
mhm.
played soccer, was really good at it. Got to college, got to play rugby there. Learned I could tackle anybody, right? But there was no pathway for a girl in football. I didn't actually really get to play until I was 22 years old. And I got recruited by a team called the Mass Mutiny, which today is the Boston Renegades. And they recruited me from a flag football league I was playing in after rugby. And they said, "Do you have any girls who are playing in your league who you think could play tackle?" Full disclosure, I had never stopped tackling. So I wasn't that popular in my flag league, right? Because
Mhm.
I didn't need pads to tackle, right? I played
Right.
rugby.
Let's do it.
And so they probably just said, "Take her." And I found my place on that team. And then when I made my first football team, I just decided, the promise I made myself was I would step up to
Mm,
every challenge the game put in my way. I had no idea what I was getting myself into that, but
right.
I think, it's still a philosophy I have to this day because when you're leading from the front and there's not really a roadmap, you're not going to have necessarily a path that you can follow.
Right.
So you've got to have a curious nature that will help you keep finding ways to move forward.
Exactly. And one of the things I remember hearing you say is, being first also means you're the only one. And this really was an area that you were the first in. So how does that feel to you to know you are a trailblazer, and how does it feel to be a trailblazer to other people?
I think it's it's both hard and well, I would say it's hard and easy.
Mhm.
It's exciting and terrifying. It's a dichotomy at all times. It means you are loved and hated,
Mhm.
right? Because people who want the status quo, they don't like you so much.
Right.
The people who are excited about change and might relate to the journey and the change, you're a hero. So you're literally, as a first, you're a hero and a villain,
Mm.
depending on what vantage point it is. So there's never anyone who's neutral about you, and it's never just smooth sailing, right? If you listen to the media, it's you would be standing on the table one day like bam, 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 and then underneath it the next day like
Right.
right. So
Exactly.
it's always a challenge, and with that, that means there's very little comfort zone. Um,
Mm.
I love seeing, as first, I think the biggest victory is that there's a second
Yeah.
and a third and a
Mhm.
fourth and a fifth. Because the scary part is you don't want to be first and only because that means the first was so bad, you're going to be the only one
Exactly.
because they're never going to make that mistake again. Right.
Mhm.
And so I think, I mean, most people like they glorify it, right? They're all trailblazer and this,
Right.
that, and the other. And when I look at it, it's a very mixed bag of a statement because only is probably the only thing that scares me, right? Because you are inherently the only one. And that means there's not necessarily a support system. There's not necessarily direct mentorship. There's
Mhm.
not necessarily the same level of fellowship. Um, and I think maybe at times what I wish I had done better was to, instead of telling people I didn't know the answer, because there's so many people who assume they're like, well, you've done all this stuff, you must know the answers. And I'm like, I don't,
Right.
because I would tell you don't do it the same way I did because it was painful and it was
Mhm.
scary. And instead of saying that, I might have seemed distant. And I think aloof is hard, but we're taught to be mentally tough, right? And to, essentially never admit fear and weakness as an athlete. So I think at times I might have seemed unrelatable because of that.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that you just said, the idea that, this was a good thing because it turned into a second, third, fourth, fifth, but sometimes it stops. Did you feel a lot of pressure on yourself to not fail? Like when you were in the middle of coaching, if something wasn't going right, how did you keep the mindset of being present where you needed to be, without this fear of if I mess up, this could be the end of it?
I feel that pressure every day
Mm,
still.
yeah.
There's it and part of that is because no matter what I do or say, people don't just listen to me as a person.
Hmm.
They listen to me as a person with a title, right? So a lot of the times you'll see instead of my name as having had an opinion or a thought or a statement, it's first female coach, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
right? That's the narrative. They may not even acknowledge me in it.
Mhm.
And so there's always a level through which a lens of which I have felt both the weight of responsibility and the joy of opportunity, um, because it never felt like it was just my own journey,
Yeah.
right? Like, and and I probably overthought many of those things
Mhm.
that, if it's just Jen, like Jen would say yes, or Jen would have a really big opinion, or Jen
Mhm.
might bawl her eyes out, or Jen may not have enough in the tank. But this person or persona
Right.
has to be there, has to show up, has to kill it.
Mhm.
Because again, I'm not just killing it for me, I'm hopefully killing it so that the next woman has an easier path than I did. And that doesn't mean she doesn't have to work. Like I got
Yeah.
to do the work for you, but that the pathways are already possible,
Right.
right? Like that's the difference, right? It's now been proven it's not impossible,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So then there is this opportunity where again, even I've said this to other people, they were like, well, were you the only one who could have? I'm like, no,
No.
I was the one who was there,
Who was
right?
there? Yeah.
There may have been people who were more qualified or better, but I was the one who was there. And that meant that I'm the one who's got to do it. And I'm the one who's got to think about those things. And
Yeah.
so I think, certain things you can do, right? Like you'll have that awareness, but it's not in your mind like when you're in the mix.
Sure.
So I always looked at, those are the big thoughts that when your responsibilities aren't so prominent, your mind goes big, and that's
Mhm.
the dangerous space. But on a day-to-day basis, like I get lost in the game of football, I get lost in the love of football, I get lost in the moment of football. I'm a big kid, like, people will see me if I'm coaching, like I'm like, don't talk to me about that, don't do this, right?
Mhm.
Like, and again, probably at times maybe was not as cognizant as I should have been, but like, if I'm coaching at a kids camp, for example, and they're like, hey, we need to talk to so and so from the media, I'm like, they can have me in this space,
Right.
right? In this window. But for the day, I'm
I'm
here.
here.
Like, I'm in the mix. If they want footage in the background, great. But they're adults, they can wait to talk to me. These kids don't ever have to wait, right? And I think it's really being present in that moment that does it. And then being very conscious of the fact that you're a hero and a villain depending on who's talking.
Mhm.
So choose who's talking to you.
I like that.
Choose whose voices get to come into your world,
Right.
right? And for those people who aren't going to help you in your mindset and your execution, right? Just people who say things about you, not to you, then that
No.
matters really not at all. And it doesn't mean you don't hear it,
Right.
but the resilience part comes from hopefully moving through it faster.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to talk because you earlier in the talk you talked about this idea of that you always step up. So I want to talk about this because like you said, it's not that you were the only one. You just are the one that happened to be there. But that wasn't it almost didn't happen because I remember you even saying you almost didn't go on the appointment. So talk about how this opportunity even came because I think there isn't necessarily luck. We show up for it.
Right. I mean, I tell people now, I'm like, and I'm open about doubt because we all have it.
Mhm.
It's very human, right? it is not human to never have fear or to never be afraid of rejection, especially not public rejection, right? Like it's human to at times just want to protect that core of ourselves.
Mhm.
And the more we've been told no, the harder it is to get back up and say, you know what, now I'm going to try it again.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's
Mhm.
like it's conditioning. And I'm 5'2". I've been told no my whole career. I was told no at tennis. I was told no for the national rugby team, all because of size. And I loved football, but you know, it was like the love of my life that I didn't know if I could deal with a no.
Mhm.
And I, when I had that tryout, like I, it took me realizing that I could live with another no. Like you don't like it, right? It still hurts. It still punches you in the face and more in the like, oh,
Right.
right? Ugh. Um, but what I didn't want to wonder for the rest of my life was what if
Mhm.
I would have just.
Yeah.
And it was that realization that finally clicked into me. And I think that's the that's the place that if we can get there, we realize like not going, I would have always been left with the wonder.
Mhm.
But going, even if I would have been told no, at least I could always look back and say, you know what, I tried. And I went for that. And you know
Right.
what? Maybe I tried the next year and I got better to do it, right? Like maybe the next year, if I hadn't made it, I was like, you know what? I had to get faster, or I
Mhm.
had to get stronger, or I needed to work on catching, or I needed to do this. And then you have an action plan from which you can move forward.
Yeah.
But a not going is going to be a life of not knowing.
Exactly. Gotta take those chances. I wanna talk a little bit about leadership because, you show up now, you're gonna be, part of the coaching team
Well,
and
that was backing up. That was
right.
playing.
Yes,
Right
that was on your
first. And
plate.
so coaching was a little bit different. Like and I'll be really honest, even when you ask me this about coaching, like even when I was a player, I didn't see myself as that person. I was not a
Mhm.
captain. I
Interesting.
was a great teammate, but I always was so hard on myself as a player. I always felt like I needed to know more, like I should know more, like I could do better, that I wasn't the person who would look at everyone else first and say, "You know what you should do?" Like
Yeah.
I was hard on myself. And so I was not the huddle caller. I was not that one.
Mhm.
I always felt like I had more. Now, conversely, if a teammate asked me, oh, I would help them. Or
Sure.
if I saw something that could make somebody better, especially in a position that I was going against, right?
Mhm.
Like I was very big on helping women on offense get better because I would show them something that would beat me, right? Like especially if there were a young player that had asked me to help them. But I was not the person who would just be like, you need to do
Right.
this because I know all the answers. Like I always felt like I had more questions than answers. So
Mhm.
I never foresaw like going that direction.
Wow. It
Yeah.
isn't it interesting how it all starts to come together for us. But I can, imagine you show up on your first day of being a coach. Here you are again, 5'2". And I get it because I'm 5 feet. And again, sometimes people just are like, what is this little girl doing here? But I would imagine, I would love to talk about what is the role that leadership plays, because I would imagine that the team bought into you because leadership bought into you. So, what were some of the things that leadership did to kind of help position you that we can learn from to make sure that as leaders we're being inclusive and sending a message of strength in our people?
Yeah. So, there's a bunch of things in this because I've had so many different points of entry into leadership that I try and reflect on what things worked and what didn't.
Mhm.
My first coaching job was in indoor football, and I instinctively said no.
Mm.
Wendell Davis, who was the head coach at the time, would not let me turn the job down. He actually took it on my behalf. So I didn't step into coaching going, I've got this, I can do this. He saw how the players who I had played with in men's professional football, as the first woman to play running back in men's pro football, he saw how they responded to me. And he said, when I told him no, he was like, listen, I can teach you how to coach football. I can't teach that.
Mhm.
Those guys love you, they respect you, they listen to you, and I can put processes in place to make you a coach. But the respect part, he was impressed by, right? So
Mhm.
that's what caught his attention and why he felt confident putting me in that position with that team, right? Because I'd already been in the locker room with them and they'd seen me take the same hits that they took. So there wasn't this like, who is this girl and does she belong here? Like they already had love and
You
respect.
earned
And,
it. You
you
earned the
know,
respect by showing up and
right,
doing the job.
right.
Mhm.
And when I went to the Cardinals, Bruce Arians did something that I just think is so simple and so powerful. And I didn't even know about it at first. I didn't know until I was writing my book. And I went to him and talked to him about like, why do you think we were so successful in a situation where the world assumed we would fail, right? Like
Mhm.
the narratives were heavy. Like guys would never take coaching from a woman, blah, blah, blah. Like really guys have been taking coaching from women their whole lives, just not in football. All right. So let's be really honest. But the narratives were thick and people do things for clicks and whatever it was. But at that time, it was a sample size of one and no one knew the answer. And it wasn't would they take coaching from this particular woman? It was the sample set of one as a woman, and that's going to set the standard that then we're going to judge by, right?
Yeah.
And the players were amazing. Like they were so good. It was like literally of all times in my life that I could say something was almost a dream. Like that was a dream that sometimes I still pinch myself with. And I've coached a long time, but they were curious and excited and a part of history, right? Like they were so in that, you know, it it almost didn't even seem like it could occur to me that it could be any other way because those players and coaches in Arizona were so amazing. And they were set up that way by the man who changed the game of football for every woman, which is
Mhm.
Bruce Arians. And what he did and what he told me about in that interview that I had never known was he told me when he met me that I have to get a lot of yeses, right? And I don't even know if I can get them yet. My mind immediately assumed that those yeses were the top yeses, right? The league team, the big,
Right.
massive things. His first yeses were the players. He
Ah.
didn't go to the big wigs first and tell these men, I'm bringing in a woman and you got to like it, right? That's a
Mhm.
little tough. He went to the leaders in his locker room first
Yeah.
and said, we have this opportunity and I think we're the right team to do this. And let me tell you about this woman. And when they said yes, he then, when he had the players buy-in,
Mhm.
he then went and sold it up top.
And I think that's such a smart thing for a leader to do because it was their team. I mean, they are the team. And
Yep,
he took care of his people and the needs of his people first
yep.
before going to like the shareholders or whatever it was. And I think that's brilliant. So I
And
think
they
that
were
again
so
set
they were
everybody.
excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were excited. I mean,
And
it's
they were
not that
part of it. They
often.
were part of the decision.
Yep.
Huge.
Yep, and it was one of the you know, to me, when I look at that, I think, what a brilliant thing
Mhm.
to have done
Yep.
to set all of us up for success in a situation where the world was gonna be watching. And
Yep.
it wasn't like they were unwilling participants who were held captive by this, this move that they could have hated.
Mhm.
They made the decision, and so it was also them making sure it was successful,
Yeah,
and they did that.
I love
And
that. So great.
and we set a standard that not only could it work, but it should be done.
Yeah,
And it should be done more often. And the NFL has done a tremendous job under the leadership of Sam Rappaport in developing pipelines for the league to intentionally create opportunities to make coaching staffs more diverse. And I
wow,
think
love that.
that's really
So
powerful.
good. Wow. So many takeaways on this talk, and so many things she talked about really just resonated so deeply with me, and just so incredibly grateful to have her on the show. Some of the things that I wrote down is, stepping up. You're going to have times where people are going to try to tear you down. You're going to have dreams, like she talked about, that your dreams are not permitted in your circle. You got to take the opportunities, because the worst thing you can do is look back and say, I wish I would have. So, again, take those chances, show up, and step up. I love what you talked about with the people around you. Who are you listening to? Do not listen to everyone. This really tied into what she talked about when it came down to trust, love, and respect. Only listen to the people who you know that you can trust, love, and respect, the ones that are there to guide you. You may not always like what they have to hear, but when you have that trust, love, and respect, you're going to know that they're sharing this stuff with you for the right reasons. So don't listen to everyone, listen to the right people. Empathy. I've talked about empathy in a couple of my other episodes, and I truly believe this is the number one skill set that we all need, is to come from that human side, to bring in that humanity piece in everything we're doing, whether it's asking another question, listening, allowing people to have their space, and to give them the validation that their feelings matter and that they matter. I love what she talked about with the idea of the blessing and the curse between pushing ourselves, because it's so great when we push ourselves, but also we need to develop kindness for ourselves, because that push can really put us down a spiral. So remember, it's that dance of, yes, push yourself to go further, but also give yourself permission to love yourself and to show kindness for yourself. And then I love when she talked about what success meant to her. It's the idea of impact, legacy, and love. I just think those were so beautiful. So, for all of you, I hope you took away so many great things. Please make sure to share this, because I know there's people out there that are fighting for their dreams. I know there's people out there that are feeling like they do not matter. And I know that there's people out there that are being so hard on themselves, that these messages from Jen can really unlock them into their own greatness. So, thank you so much. Make sure to like, follow, share, leave us a rating. I'm Clara Capano. Thank you for being here for another episode of Women Winning Their Way.